When Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine, Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko was quick to hitch his country's wagon to the Russian war machine. Stick with Putin, Lukashenko thought, and the war would be over in weeks. Belarus would benefit from being Russia's only direct ally. Only that hasn't happened. The Ukraine war has dragged on for years and Belarus has started to suffer. What was supposed to be a mutually beneficial alliance has instead put Belarus on the verge of losing its sovereignty. Putin's war is draining the country, and Lukashenko never saw it coming. This wasn't supposed to be the story of Belarus. Lukashenko has spent decades proving himself a shrewd political survivor, clinging to power even when the odds were against him. Before the war, he balanced carefully between Russia and the West, offering just enough promises of reform to keep Europe from shutting its doors on him completely. For years, Belarus was effectively neutral. But all of that changed when he threw his lot in with Putin's invasion. Belarus allowed Russia to use its territory as a staging ground for the attack on Ukraine and, as later reports revealed, even played a role in Russia's campaign of abducting Ukrainian children. Lukashenko also agreed to host Russian nuclear weapons, breaking years of promises that he would never do so. The logic was clear. Lukashenko, like many others, believed Ukraine couldn't withstand Russia's military might. Once Kiev fell, Belarus would be rewarded for its loyalty. But Ukraine stood its ground, and Belarus began to pay the price. So closely tied had Belarus become to Russia that their economies began to mirror one another. By the end of 2022, Belarus's economy contracted by nearly 5%. Western sanctions meant for Russia spilled over onto Belarus. Russia's GDP shrank for 12 consecutive months in that same period, and Belarus shared the pain. Yet a surprising rebound came in 2023. Russia's endless need for weapons gave Belarus a lifeline. Lukashenko's economy grew by about 4% in both 2023 and 2024, fueled by Russian cash injections and arms production. For a brief moment, the war seemed to benefit him. But this rebound came at a cost. Belarus's economy has become almost Soviet in design, centralized, militarized, and increasingly dependent on Russia for survival. Lukashenko's alliance has turned his country into little more than a feeder state. And the deeper Belarus tied itself to Russia, the more it began to unravel. One of the most surprising cracks appeared in the form of something found in almost every kitchen: potatoes. A Politico report in mid-2025 revealed that Belarus was experiencing a potato shortage. The crop, often called the country's second bread, is central to the Belarusian diet. But Lukashenko's price controls made potatoes unprofitable to farm. By 2024, production dropped by nearly 1 million tons compared to the year before. Farmers shifted to other crops and shortages followed. When potato prices spiked, Lukashenko exploded in a cabinet meeting. "You didn't do it and you'll answer for it," he shouted. "It turns out we don't have potatoes. Can't we produce enough? Put them in the cellar and sell them? I warned you last year." His rant, almost unhinged, revealed a leader aware he was losing control. By spring 2025, potato prices had risen by 10%. Lukashenko demanded farmers produce enough for both Belarus and Russia, attempting to impose Soviet-style quotas. But Belarus isn't the Soviet Union. Instead, it is a nation where every economic decision is shaped by the question, what would Putin think? Potatoes, of course, are only a symptom. Inflation has been crushing Belarusians. The monthly rate hasn't dropped below 5% since late 2023, with food inflation consistently above 10%. Bread, milk, and basic staples are still on shelves but increasingly unaffordable. Transportation costs have also surged, further pushing up consumer prices. At the same time, Belarus is suffering from a labor shortage. Nearly 200,000 job vacancies remain unfilled, a problem made worse by Lukashenko's pivot to a wartime economy. The shortage has grown so severe that Lukashenko proposed bringing in 150,000 Pakistani workers, a controversial move that underlined his desperation. These struggles echo Russia's own problems. Moscow is also dealing with inflation, a rising cost of living, and labor shortages. Belarus's fate is now chained to Russia's. And when Russia falters, so does its smaller neighbor. That reality was underscored in mid-2025, when Ukraine launched drone strikes on the Druzhba oil pipeline, a key artery for Russian crude that also feeds Belarusian refineries. The strikes left Belarus without oil supplies, and fuel prices spiked almost immediately. Queues formed at gas stations. Farmers couldn't power their equipment and unrest began to brew. Lukashenko expected help from Moscow. But Putin, ever self-serving, ordered Russian oil companies to buy from Belarus instead. With its refineries strained and its own population facing shortages, Belarus was forced to restrict supplies to Russia by late August. While this looked like a small act of defiance, the larger lesson was clear. When Belarus needed help, Russia betrayed it. This betrayal exposed the cost of Lukashenko's choices. Belarus is deeply tied into Russia's economy, yet has little to show for it beyond vulnerability. The result is a puppet state in danger of losing its last shred of independence. Concerns about Belarus's sovereignty aren't new. Al Jazeera warned in early 2025 that Lukashenko had become a hostage to his own system, surviving only because of Putin's support. If it weren't for Russia's protection, Lukashenko might have been ousted years ago. But that support has now become a noose. All Putin has to do is pull. Military integration has made the situation even worse. The Zapad 2025 military exercise, involving 10,000 Belarusian and 4,000 Russian troops, was smaller than past drills. But experts noted the real purpose wasn't projecting strength toward NATO. Instead, it was about normalizing Russia's permanent presence in Belarus. As one former British intelligence officer put it, Belarus is almost partially fallen to Russia anyway. Russia's strategy has been long in the making. As far back as 2000, Belarus was included under Russia's nuclear umbrella. Since then, integration has grown deeper, culminating in August 2025 with Russia's announcement that it would station its new hypersonic Oreshnik missiles on Belarusian soil. Lukashenko might tell himself that these moves strengthen Belarus, but in reality, they reveal how completely Putin sees the country as his own. Absorption into the Russian Federation is no longer unthinkable, it looks inevitable. Yet Lukashenko doesn't see himself as a mere puppet. According to analysts, he has always sought to widen his room for maneuver. That's why in recent months he has made tentative gestures toward the West. The decision to limit oil sales to Russia was one hint. Reports suggest he is considering releasing political prisoners in exchange for sanctions relief. In June 2025, U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg visited Minsk, leading to the release of opposition leader Sergei Tsikhanouski, who was rushed to the Lithuanian border. For Lukashenko, these steps are survival tactics. Putin has shown him that Belarus is expendable, a country to be drained rather than supported. The president now faces a choice: cling to Russia and watch his sovereignty vanish, or attempt once again to balance between East and West. The question is whether it's too late. Belarus stands on the brink of economic collapse and political implosion. For decades, Lukashenko played the role of survivor, always finding space to maneuver. But by tying Belarus so tightly to Putin's war, he may have sealed his own fate and his country's. Meanwhile, Putin is looking elsewhere for support. With Belarus faltering, Russia has turned to other nations, including Turkey, to help sustain its war in Ukraine. What happens next will shape not only Belarus's future, but the balance of power in Europe itself.